The front door slammed shut, the sound shattering the eerie silence that had gripped our home for months. I glanced up from the evening news, my heart lurching at the unexpected intrusion. "Carl, is that you?" I called out, unable to mask the bewilderment in my voice. He strode into the living room, not alone, but with a teenage boy in tow. My brow furrowed as I studied the stranger, tall and lanky with unkempt, dirty blonde hair. He avoided eye contact, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Rowena, we need to talk," Carl stated firmly, guiding the boy to the worn sofa across from me. My mouth went dry, stomach tying itself into knots. Those words never preceded anything good. "What's going on?" Carl cleared his throat, his jaw set with determination. "This is Finn. He's going to be living with us from now on." I blinked hard, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "He needs a place to stay, and I've decided to take him in." Anger sparked within me as the weight of his unilateral decision hit home. "You decided? Without even discussing this with me?" I fought to keep my voice steady, my hands gripping the armrests. "Carl, we can't just bring a strange teenager to live in our home." "He's not a stranger," Carl countered, placing a hand on Finn's slouched shoulder. "I've known his family for years." My eyes narrowed at the obvious omission. "Had known, you mean? Otherwise he wouldn't need a place to stay, would he?" An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, thick as fog. Finn kept his gaze averted, seemingly wishing he could simply evaporate into the couch cushions. I inhaled deeply, struggling to make sense of this chaos Carl had unleashed upon our lives. "You know what? It's late. This discussion isn't over, but it can wait until morning when we've all had a chance to process whatever this is." I waved a hand in Finn's direction. Pushing myself up from the recliner, I crossed the room, snatching my purse from the entry table. "I'm going for a drive to clear my head. We'll continue this when I get back." "Rowena," Carl started, rising to his feet, but I had already swept out the door, letting it slam behind me. The crisp night air slapped my face as I stormed towards the driveway. My mind raced almost as fast as my pulse, a jumbled whirlwind of confusion, resentment, and disbelief. Who was this boy? Why was he being forced into our lives, into my life? And why did I have the terrible feeling that this marked the beginning of the end? I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I navigated the quiet streets, my knuckles straining white. The gentle hum of the engine did little to drown out the overwhelming flood of thoughts swirling in my mind. How could Carl do this? Bring a strange boy into our home without so much as a heads up? Sure, our marriage had been strained for years. The endless rounds of fertility treatments, his perpetual impatience with my lack of employment, the ever-widening chasm between us. But I never expected such a unilateral, reckless decision from him. The more I turned it over in my head, the more Carl's actions reeked of desperation. His construction business had been floundering the last few years, eating into our savings at an alarming rate. Could this be some misguided ploy to curry favor, to ease his financial burdens? My foot eased off the gas as the ugly truth materialized before me. I could no longer deny the depravity that Carl had seemingly embraced. Using this poor kid as some kind of meal ticket was vile, even for him. Revulsion curdled in my gut as I pulled into the driveway. I had to confront him, to stop whatever depravity he had planned. Squaring my shoulders, I marched inside, startling at the sight of Finn slouched on the sofa, alone. "Where's Carl?" I demanded, struggling to soften my tone. The boy's eyes went wide before darting away. "He went to bed, said he was tired from driving back from—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't need the details, Finn. Just tell me where he is." He mutely pointed down the hallway towards our bedroom. I brushed past him without a second glance and stormed to the door, throwing it open with a bang. Carl jolted upright in bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Rowena? What the hell?" "Don't play dumb, Carl." I crossed my arms, jaw clenched. "I want the truth about why you brought that boy here. All of it." He sighed heavily, raking his fingers through his thinning hair. "I told you, his family situation is complicated. The kid needed help, so I offered to take him in temporarily." "Liar!" I could no longer contain my fury, my voice rising with each syllable. "I know about your money issues, about how bad things have gotten with the business." Carl paled, his eyes going wide with disbelief. "You've been spying on me? Don't try to turn this around on me." I shook my head in disgust. I just want to know what kind of sleazy scam you've got planned with that poor boy. The resounding crack of his palm striking my cheek abruptly silenced me. I recoiled, cupping the fiery sting blooming on my face as tears sprang unbidden to my eyes. You disgust me. Carl spat the words, venom dripping from every syllable. You deserve far worse than that for the baseless accusations against me. Cradling my bruised face, I backed away in stunned silence, the hallway spinning around me. In that moment, I knew my life would never be the same again. I sat in stunned silence, gingerly pressing an ice pack to my throbbing cheek. The slight chill did little to numb the ache blossoming deep inside me. How could Carl have hit me? The man I once loved, trusted with every fiber of my being? His callous outburst left me shaken to my core. I had seen him angry before, but never violent, never this unhinged. The soft creak of footsteps drew my attention. Finn hovered in the hallway, shifting his weight anxiously. "I heard shouting," he muttered, unable to meet my gaze. "Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died on my lips. What could I possibly say? That my husband had struck me during an argument about his shady motivations for taking you in. My jaw clenched as humiliation burned my cheeks. Seeming to sense my distress, Finn inched closer, perching on the edge of the armchair across from me. "You want to talk about it? Maybe I can help." I studied him for a long moment, my brain screaming not to trust this boy caught in the middle of Carl's twisted web. But my heart urged me to finally get some answers. "Finn, why are you really here?" I asked, lowering the ice pack. "What's your connection to Carl?" The boy's eyes went wide, his Adam's apple bobbing. I told him the truth, that my parents are gone and I had nowhere to go. My brow furrowed as I parsed his words. "Had nowhere to go? You mean you've been living on the streets?" Finn shrugged, toying with a loose thread on his tattered sleeve. "For a while, yeah. Couch surfing, hitching rides." He trailed off, his gaze focused somewhere over my shoulder. "I didn't have any other family, so when I met Carl at the youth center a few months ago, he said he could help me out." Realization dawned, pieces sliding into place. Carl must have been scouting the center, searching for the perfect target to ensnare in his scheme, a wayward teen, bereft of support or resources. My heart clenched as I studied Finn. He couldn't have been more than 16, still just a child, despite his tough facade. "I'm so sorry, Finn," I murmured, reaching out to grasp his hand. "You've been through so much already. You didn't deserve to get caught up in Carl's mess." He flinched at my touch, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes swam with confusion, wariness, but also the faintest glimmer of hope. You know what's really going on?" I leaned back with a weary sigh, pondering how to answer. Did I dare reveal the full depth of Carl's manipulation, the greed that had driven him to using this poor boy as a pawn in his self-serving games? One look into Finn's haunted eyes steeled my resolve. He deserved the truth, no matter how ugly. "Not all of it," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out. I promise you that." 2 days after my confrontation with Carl, I found myself sitting across from a stern-faced woman in a dingy office. The faint smell of stale coffee hung in the air, matching the drab decor. "So let me get this straight, Mrs. Benson," Veronica Davies, private investigator, drawled in a flat Midwestern accent. She reviewed the crumpled notes spread before her. "You want me to look into your husband's finances and his connection to this Finn kid he brought into your home?" I shifted in the creaky chair, nodding. "That's right. I need to know what Carl is up to, what kind of schemes he's got planned." I paused, chewing my lip. Money is definitely part of it, but I get the sense there's more going on. Veronica arched an eyebrow. "Like what? Your husband involved in something illegal?" A tremor went through me as I recalled the menacing glint in Carl's eye when he struck me. Honestly, I don't know anymore. But I'm afraid of what I might find out. The investigator gave a curt nod before shuffling her notes into a folder. "Okay, I'll see what I can dig up on your husband's business dealings and his connection to the boy. Just know that whatever I discover, it won't be pretty." Those words proved prophetic over the next few weeks as Veronica's findings gradually trickled in. First were the bank statements revealing Carl's company had been hemorrhaging money for over a year with no end in sight. Unpaid loans, missed payments on equipment, he was in a free fall with no parachute. Next came the background reports on Finn himself. His full name was Finn McAllister. and despite his hardscrabble appearance, he was the sole heir to a multi-million-dollar trust fund set up by his deceased parents. The final, damning piece of evidence was Carl's legal status regarding Finn's inheritance. As a distant cousin, he had been designated executor and temporary guardian of the fund until Finn turned 18 in just over a year. My head spun as the full twisted picture materialized. Carl's insistence on bringing Finn into our home, gaining his trust under the guise of selfless charity, only to drain his accounts once he secured legal access. It was a long con of epic proportions, made even more reprehensible by his intended victim, a child robbed of any real family. I sat in a daze as Veronica revealed every last scrap of evidence on my husband's despicable scheme. Bile rose in my throat as a horrifying question crept forward. Just how far would a man like Carl go to secure his payday? The weight of Veronica's revelations hung over me like an oppressive storm cloud. Each damning fact she unveiled felt like another blow, chipping away at the fragile reality I had constructed around my life with Carl. How could I have been so blind, so utterly oblivious to the depths of his depravity? The man I had once looked at with devotion was now a virtual stranger. A master manipulator obsessed with reclaiming status and wealth, no matter who got crushed underfoot. As the shock faded, a cold fury took its place, settling into my bones. I could no longer stay silent, could no longer bury my head and hope this nightmare would pass. Carl's twisted plans had to be stopped, even if it meant ripping our lives apart. I steeled myself before striding into the living room, where Finn sat watching TV, feet kicked up on the battered coffee table. He startled at my entrance, panic flickering across his features before melting into wary defiance. "We need to talk," I stated in a tone that brooked no argument. Finn shifted on the couch, clutching the remote like a lifeline. "Look, if this is about me eating the last of the Cheerios, I can just buy some more." "It's not about the cereal," I said with a weary sigh, leveling my gaze at him. "It's about why you're really here, Finn. Why Carl brought you into our home." The color drained from his face as my meaning sank in. He told me it was to help me get on my feet, that I could stay as long as I needed. Lies, all of it. Fighting to keep my voice steady, I began relaying what Veronica had uncovered: Carl's financial ruin, the truth about Finn's inheritance, even their distant familial connection. With each revelation, Finn's eyes widened further, his mouth hanging agape. By the end, he was shaking his head almost violently, a maelstrom of hurt and disbelief clouding his features. No, you've got it all wrong," he insisted, leaping to his feet to pace in frantic circles. "Carl said he wanted to look after me, that I was like a son to him." His words trailed off into anguished silence as the cruel reality settled in. His reprieve from homelessness, the promise of refuge and care from a supportive adult figure, had all been an elaborately staged lie. "I'm so sorry, Finn," I murmured, my own throat growing tight. "Carl is willing to destroy anyone and anything for his own selfish gain." At that, Finn wheeled on me, blue eyes blazing with fury. "So what are you going to do about it? Just sit back and let him take everything I have left?" His outburst caught me off guard. I hesitated, insecurity gnawing at my resolve. I'm not sure yet, but I promise you I won't let Carl get away with this deplorable scheme." Finn searched my face, shoulders heaving with each ragged breath. Whatever he found in my expression must have convinced him, as some of the turbulent anger in his gaze faded. "You'd better not," he muttered, scrubbing a hand over his damp cheek. "'Cause if you don't stop him, no one will." The weeks following my confrontation with Finn were a blur of tense silences and eggshell walking around the house. Carl remained oblivious to the fact that I was onto his scheme, operating under the delusion that his web of lies was still intact. I could scarcely look him in the eye without feeling disgust churn in my gut. This man I had once loved was now a practitioner of emotional brutality, deploying manipulation as deftly as a surgeon wields a scalpel. My only solace came from confiding in Finn, the boy-turned-accomplice who wore his own anger like a suit of armor. We strategized in hushed tones while Carl was away on business trips, plotting how best to unravel his deceit and stop him from laying hands on Finn's inheritance. "The bastard's got all the legal ducks lined up thanks to his stupid guardianship status," Finn growled one evening while poring over a thick stack of documents from Veronica. It'll be almost impossible to get access to my trust fund after I turn 18 next month. I nodded grimly, recalling the sickening crunch of numbers Veronica had calculated. Over $12 million that Carl would be able to siphon away once he controlled Finn's assets. More than enough to settle his debts and maintain his opulent lifestyle. Unless we can get the guardianship revoked before then, I mused, eager to cling to any sliver of hope. Show that Carl is willfully neglecting his legal duty as executor by plotting to drain the accounts. Finn's expression turned wistful as he toyed with the silver chain peeking from beneath his collar. If only Dad were still around, he'd know exactly how to handle this legal crap and bury Carl for good. On impulse, I reached across to still his restless hands. You know, even after everything, there's still a chance we can make this right. Build a life worth living, surrounded by people who genuinely care about your well-being. He regarded me for a long moment before his features softened almost imperceptibly. You really think so? I know so, I assured him, our eyes locked, and in that moment I felt the first frail flickers of hope after so many weeks of despair and dread. Of course, our reprieve couldn't last. Carl chose that night to return home early from yet another business trip, barging through the door in an alcohol-soaked stupor. Finn and I sprang apart guiltily, clutching the documents in a panic. Well, what do we have here? Carl slurred, squinting at the papers strewn across the table. His beady eyes widened as comprehension dawned. Going through my stuff, I see. Invading my privacy. I rose to my feet, chest tightening in dread. Carl, it's not what you think. Save it, he barked, wheeling on Finn with undisguised contempt. I knew letting that sniveling brat into our home was a mistake. Look at the kind of trouble he's stirring up already. Don't you dare talk about me like that, Finn snarled, fists clenched. Not after everything you put me through with your lies and schemes. Carl's face contorted into an ugly sneer. Schemes? I've been the one keeping a roof over your worthless head all these months. Least you could do is show a little gratitude instead of stabbing me in the back. We know everything, Carl, I interjected before the situation could escalate further. About the business, the inheritance, how you've been planning to drain Finn's accounts once you get control of the money. A muscle ticked in Carl's jaw as he swayed unsteadily in place. The seconds ticked by in silence so heavy I could scarcely draw breath. So, he growled at last, fixing me with a look of pure loathing. Now you know the truth. His voice dropped to a menacing rasp, which means there's only one thing left to do about you interfering busybodies. My heart stuttered as I watched Carl reach into his jacket pocket with a slow, deliberate movement. As the dull gleam of metal winked in the dim light, I felt my world shift off its axis. Dear God, what had I gotten us into? My heart pounded in my ears as Carl slowly withdrew a gleaming revolver from his jacket pocket. The metallic rasp of the hammer cocking sent a tremor of dread down my spine. So you two think you've got it all figured out, huh? Carl's voice dripped with venom as he waved the gun unsteadily in our direction. That you can just unravel years of my hard work to secure our family's future? I raised my hands in a placating gesture, mind racing to defuse the explosive situation. Carl, please, put the gun down. We can talk about this like rational adults. Rational? He spat out a harsh laugh. You're the ones who've been scheming behind my back, sticking your noses where they don't belong. Beside me, Finn tensed, coiled like a spring ready to bolt. Just take it easy, man. No one needs to get hurt here. You're damn right about that. Carl swung the revolver to bear directly on the boy. If either of you idiots thinks you're going to take my future away, you've got another thing coming. Alarm surged through me at the lethal glint in my husband's crazed eyes. He'd truly snapped, pushed over the edge by the exposure of his lies. I had to act, had to stop this from spiraling further out of control. Gathering every ounce of courage, I surged forward and knocked Carl's arm aside just as he squeezed the trigger. The deafening boom of the gunshot reverberated through the small room as plaster exploded from the wall behind Finn. We both froze for an endless heartbeat of stillness before hell broke loose. You crazy bitch! Carl roared, shoving me backwards with savage force. I slammed into the table, agony blossoming as the edge connected with the base of my skull. White-hot flashes of light danced across my vision. Through the haze, I caught a glimpse of Carl raising the gun once more, taking deliberate aim at the frozen, terrified Finn. Acting on pure instinct, I grabbed blindly at the discarded documents and flung them at my unhinged husband. The papers pelted Carl's face with an explosive flutter, momentarily obscuring his sight. He snarled in rage and batted them away, but not before a wild shot rang out, punching a fist-sized hole in the plaster above the fireplace. "That's it, you're both dead," he howled, whipping the revolver back towards us with murderous intent. In that split second, Finn jarred into action, seizing the heavy marble ashtray from the mantel and lobbing it with every ounce of strength he possessed. It caught Carl square between the eyes with a sickening crunch, immediately dropping him to the floor in a limp, unconscious heap. The gun skittered across the floorboards as silence crashed over the chaotic scene like a crushing wave. I lay sprawled amidst the debris, chest heaving against the agonizing pounding in my skull as black spots swam before my vision. "Rowena? Oh God, are you?" Finn fell beside me, features awash with panic as he cradled my head. "I'm okay," I gasped, blinking hard to refocus, relatively speaking at least. A shudder racked the boy's slender frame as the weight of what just transpired sank in. We can't let him get away with this. He tried to kill us." I followed his haunted gaze towards the crumpled form that was once my husband, a wave of revulsion churning my stomach. After everything Carl had put us through, his callous disregard for human life in pursuit of wealth and status, this was the inevitable outcome. My lips set in a grim line. "You're right, Finn. His reign of terror ends now, one way or another." The aftermath of our confrontation with Carl was a whirlwind of police, lawyers, and what felt like an endless parade of questions and accusations. Despite the overwhelming chaos, I was buoyed by one constant: Finn's unwavering presence by my side. The boy who had been just a stranger in my home mere months ago was now the sole tether keeping me grounded. We clung to each other as the legal machinery ground into motion to dismantle Carl's tangled web of deceit. Charges were filed: attempted murder, embezzlement, illegal possession of a firearm. Carl's web of lies quickly unraveled under scrutiny as the extent of his schemes were laid bare. He fought the charges viciously, aided by the high-priced lawyers his ill-gotten funds could afford. But in the end, the towering pile of evidence amassed against him proved insurmountable. I'll never forget the sight of him being led from the courthouse in handcuffs, bellowing profanities and vile curses at anyone who would listen. Finn squeezed my hand tightly, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel the heavy knot of dread and fear in the pit of my stomach. Carl's wrath was impotent. His callous disregard for human life and morality had finally caught up with him. As he disappeared into the back of a police transport, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. In the weeks and months that followed, I took the first shaky steps towards reclaiming my life. With Carl imprisoned and facing decades behind bars, his business assets were liquidated to pay restitution and untangle his financial crimes. It was a slow, grueling process, but I found solace in watching the shattered pieces of my old life being slowly reassembled into something new, something stronger and more resilient than the fragile facade I had once called a marriage. More importantly, I had Finn, the innocent victim who had been so cruelly swept into Carl's vortex of greed and manipulation. Once just a threadbare stranger, he steadily became the family I had always dreamed of, but been denied for so long. We spent long hours talking through the traumas of our shared ordeal. I confided my struggles with infertility and the sense of worthlessness that the inability to conceive a child had instilled. In turn, Finn opened up about his parents' deaths at a young age and the profound emptiness he had endured while drifting through the harsh realities of life on the streets. Gradually, an unspoken understanding took root between us, an affirmation that we had both been granted a second chance at the family bonds we craved. I had already begun the process of legally adopting Finn when he turned 18, and gained full access to his inheritance. Of course, the money meant little to either of us at that point. Our fractured lives had finally found stability and acceptance in each other. And as we stood before the judge, making our new family official, I felt an overwhelming sense of hope and peace wash over me. I caught Finn's eye as I said the final words, solidifying our bond. He smiled at me, that same guarded, vulnerable smile he had first given the night I vowed to protect him. Except this time, it glowed with the promise of our new future. After so much fear and darkness, light had finally found its way into our lives again. And I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would confront it together as the unified family we were always meant to be.